Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Reimagining Data Protection with Rubrik and NetApp. Thank you so much for joining us on the event. We've got a great event lined up for you. Before we get started, just a few things that you should know about today's webinar. First off, this is presented in partnership with Rubrik and NetApp, and we've got a great presentation here. I'll introduce you to our two expert presenters in just a moment. Before we do that, just a few things to know. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll be serving as the moderator. As always, with our Actual Tech Media events here, we want these to be educational. We want to help you to solve your technology challenges. And so we encourage your questions there in the questions panel of your audience console. And we'll be doing a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation today. We also have our best question prize, which I'll be talking about in just a moment. Before we cover that, I want to call your attention first to the Handouts tab. It's there that you'll find links to 3 hand-selected resources that you need to check out before you leave the event today. There's a link to the Better NAS Backup RPO, a link to the Tech on Tap podcast, and a link to download the Data Storage and Data Protection ebook. So make sure that you check out those resources. And then finally, we do have our Amazon $300 gift card door prize. I'll be announcing the winner of that prize at the end of the presentation today. Of course, if you're watching this on demand, the drawing has already occurred. The prize terms and conditions can be found in the Handouts tab. And then, as I mentioned, we also have our best question prize for an Amazon $50 gift card. Prize winners will be selected for that and contacted after the webinar. All right, it's time now to kick off today's presentation. Before we do, I've got a few poll questions for you, and then I'll be handing it off to our expert presenters. On the event, you'll hear from Mr. Mike Recker, Senior Systems Engineer at Rubrik, and Mr. Chris Mano, Senior Solutions Architect Manager at NetApp. But first, before we do that, 3 quick poll questions for you out there in the audience. First question is on the screen now, and that is, how familiar are you with Rubrik? Maybe you're a Rubrik customer, maybe you're familiar with them, but not a customer today, or maybe you're pretty new to who Rubrik is and what they do. So if you select your option there on the screen that corresponds to you and your company, we do appreciate your feedback. I'll give everyone a moment to respond. All right, thank you for those responses. Let's move on now to the next poll question. And same question here, but about NetApp. How familiar are you with NetApp? Maybe you're a NetApp customer, maybe you're familiar, but not a customer, or maybe just relatively new to NetApp. All right, thank you for those responses. Let's now move on to our third poll question before I introduce you to our expert presenters, and that is on the screen now. What's your level of familiarity with object storage technology? All right, thank you for your feedback on those polls. We do appreciate that. It's time now to get this webinar started. I'm excited now to hand it over to Chris. Take it away, Chris.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everybody. So I just wanted to, before we started, introduce myself. My name is Chris Mano. I've been in NetApp for 16 years. I am part of what we call a solutions architect team that focuses around data protection. I've had the honor for the last 2 years to be interacting, actually, to be the focal point between our company and Rubrik. So I've become very friendly and very familiar with a lot of people at Rubrik. Mike, you want to introduce yourself?
Yep, thanks, Chris. My name is Mike Recker, and a lot like Chris, I've been at Rubrik for quite a while, about 6 years to be exact. And excuse me, Chris and I have been working together for the last 2.5 or 2 years or so in a joint capacity to get our two companies to get a much stronger relationship, which you'll notice here throughout the presentation. So thank you. All right, let's roll through the agenda here real quick. So Rubrik and we're going to give a Rubrik and NetApp technical overview. We're going to start out first and just go over, what and why is Rubrik. I noticed in the polling questions there were some folks that were fairly new to Rubrik. It's great to see some customers on here. We want to make sure that we give you a pretty decent overview of what our platform's capable of. Then we're going to move in to talk about how Rubrik and NetApp are working together and can make your environment much better. And then some very specific things such as Rubrik and NetApp StorageGRID. Then the enterprise NAS challenges. Obviously, we've teamed up with the enterprise NAS leader in NetApp, and there's some challenges with big data, as we all know. Then the last couple of items, we'll go through what FabricPool is and how to protect that, and then some really cool Rubrik and NetApp ONTAP API integrations that really simplify data protection. And then we'll have some additional info at the very end. So what and why is Rubrik? So Rubrik started at the very end of 2013, and we were in stealth for about a year and a half. And the reason why was we started looking at data protection and data management. If you look at that from the 1990s to present, there's multiple different silos, multiple different disparate products, vendors, and solutions that really kind of patched together as data grew. A lot of things have come along here in the last 5 to 7 years, such as cloud, automation via APIs. And certainly within the last 2 years, then certainly top of mind for most people these days is security. When you look at a lot of these solutions, they weren't developed with this in mind. A lot of the legacy backup providers that we looked at and we studied before we launched, there wasn't ransomware. There was no such thing as a RESTful API. Cloud didn't exist. So a lot of these items are getting retrofitted back in, and quite honestly, they just don't work well. So what we've done is we've enabled you to be able to digitally transform your business. We were developed with cloud in mind. We're an API first platform. And what we also looked at is we gave you the ability to have a hardened security platform from day one. So the big question is, and we get this quite often, is how does this work? So from an enterprise backup perspective, when we looked at launching the product or launching the platform, a lot of people were managing jobs. It was a full-time solution. One of my largest enterprise customers had almost 800 jobs before they implemented Rubrik. What we were able to do is we were able to implement a platform less than 30 minutes, regardless of size. You can auto-discover your environment. We have what's called an SLA policy, which I'll dig into here in just a sec. But think of this more as you're declaring a business outcome as just setting up jobs. We've also got orchestrated recovery for near zero RPOs and RTOs, which really comes in handy in the event that there's a security incident, which I'll also talk about. One of the other things that we did from day one is we originally started out, we gave customers the ability to archive to the S3 protocol. So when you look at our relationship with NetApp, that's one of the things that we've really leveraged. There are also other vendors out there. AWS really was kind of the pioneer of the S3 protocol from a cloud hyperscaler perspective. But it gives you the ability to instantly archive to a private or public cloud. You also have instantly accessible VMs with global search. So what we've done is we can orchestrate VMs from an on-premise perspective, and we can actually convert those into cloud instances. The other thing is, and we'll dig into this because this is very important in today's day and age, we were built for security with the zero trust design. Everything is end-to-end encrypted at its source, in flight, and most importantly at rest. So we also have an immutable file system. So really what that, and we've had incidents, and I'll give a specific example of ransomware events that we've significantly helped our customers recover from. But we have a platform that's immutable and it's built so you cannot modify data. We have retention lock. Think of this as having 2 keys before you launch the nuclear weapon. So there's no internal bad actors that can potentially go in and wipe out a cluster, wipe out SLAs, delete backups, or delete data. 2-factor authentication and time-based one-time password. The easiest way to put this here for all of our customers, we simply say, you have a time-based one-time password and 2-factor authenticated password ability to log into your bank. Wouldn't you want that with your backup solution? Because that's kind of your last line of data recovery. So we've had that implemented for quite some time. So from an SLA perspective, it's policy driven. Again, I like to say you're declaring a business outcome instead of just setting up a nightly job, a weekly job, or a monthly job. And what we've done is we've taken all those different disparate jobs. And again, I've got examples of customers that have taken hundreds of these and got down to just a couple of SLA domains. And that's really where you are declaring that business outcome of this is when I'm going to back up. This is how long I'm going to keep it. And more importantly, you can replicate that data. You can set it up to archive out to a private cloud, such as NetApp StorageGRID, or you can use some of the public hyperscalers. The nice part about this is longer term storage retention. Object storage we see as being significantly more price effective is the way I like to put it. So if you don't want to go to the public cloud, some of the larger organizations that we work with don't. We've got a great partnership with NetApp and we can talk in depth on how that works. So again, we were built on a RESTful API platform. We've got a lot of different tooling integrations, and these are just some of them. I mean, every day there's another one that comes out. I know we've got a recent relationship with Palo Alto with their Cortex product. But again, because we're RESTful, we have a lot of customers, if they want to actually use other tools, they can, on the right here, the example of ServiceNow, you can run our entire platform from another platform because we're RESTful and it's portable. So very, very flexible. So secure by design, this is a big deal. It has to be secure. Your data, and again, we're the last line of defense in the event of a ransomware attack or whatever it may be. So audit compliance and reporting, all of user events and cluster events are logged and they're viewable via our UI. Talked a little bit about encryption, end-to-end, while you're taking a backup, while you're storing a backup, while you're replicating it, whether you're archiving it or replicating it to the cloud or another Rubrik cluster, it's always encrypted. And we do support SAML 2.0 for multi-factor and single sign-on authentication, which is huge. You need to have these tools in place with your backup solution, whether it's us or someone else. These are things that need to be top of mind. Access, we do have role-based access control. We've got large organizations where different business units have different access controls to get in and run just their line of business. So the nice part is you can have this segmented out across multiple lines of business and no one's going to be able to touch anybody else's data, even internally. Again, secure by design. The stakes are raised. We've all seen the events over the last, even just a couple of weeks. Every day it's something else. We have an append-only file system, and that's designed to be immune from ransomware. What that means is we've got several backups that have happened over the course of a day or months or weeks, whatever it is. Even if we did ingest a backup of data that was infected via ransomware, the way our file system is laid out, it cannot be modified. So it's not going to propagate throughout the entire system. We've got a zero trust design. All cluster communication is securely encrypted by certificates and all authentication is validated on access. At the bottom here, we've got a list, kind of the eye chart of some of the different certifications. The retention lock, I think that's a big one. We have a lot of customers that are worried about internal bad actors potentially removing data. We have that, again, you need 2 keys instead of 1 to launch the missile is the way I like to put it. And again, we have a very hardened platform. So it's delivered on certified hardware. It's pre-hardened to reduce deployment and complexity, and most importantly, the attack surface. So Rubrik Cloud Data Management, again, these are the big things here. It's extremely simple. I mean, I've set up a lot of these. I did a lot of the original installs back in the day, and it was 5 installs, 4 different cities in three days. So it's extremely, extremely easy to set up. You've got two-click instant recovery, where I can recover VMs, databases, whatever it may be. You've got global search across all files and objects, and we don't have component sprawl. So we own the entire user experience. That's another vendor that's responsible for this. There's another vendor that's responsible for that aspect of it. So again, it's that business outcome instead of a cobbled together solution. So security, we really kind of hit on this. I'll hit on it one more time. It's an immutable infrastructure, a zero trust architecture. Again, you've got end-to-end encryption with single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, and time-based one-time password. Cannot stress that enough. Regardless of what solution you have, you should be implementing that. The RBAC and multi-tenancy, I just talked about that here just a bit ago. And we do have some ransomware detection and some compliance for sensitive data that I'll touch on here in just a bit. The other thing that I really like about the platform, because we're fairly new, we took an API first approach. So anything can be automated, tooled against, integrated into other platforms, whatever that may be. From a scale out perspective, a lot of the legacy products were built before scale out was really a thing. So we're a masterless architecture. We have what we call bricks. There's 4 nodes in each one. We have customers that have dozens upon dozens of bricks, in a single cluster, if that's what they'd like. There's no single point of failure. And really the larger a cluster gets, the less there's really any risk of anything happening, because there's no single point of failure across the entire scale out architecture. So we've got global indexing. A lot of our founders came from Google. So a lot of the predictive search that you've seen over the years here for Google, that's been incorporated into our product, because everything is, as it's ingested, it's cataloged, metadata is created, and it's instantly searchable. We did also, early on, we were cloud ready from day one. We could archive out to S3. We've then worked with partners like NetApp, where we can archive to object storage locally. We can go to NFS locally if you're not ready for the public cloud or the hyperscalers. You can project directly into the cloud if that's the way you want to go. And for some customers that do want to have a posture in the cloud, we can instantiate VMs from archive into the cloud. And that's used for like a test dev scenario, for a disaster recovery scenario. And we can do cloud native workload protection as well. So I'm going to invite Chris to kind of chime in here, but Rubrik and NetApp started talking about 2.5 years ago. It's funny because Chris was on one side of the table with their executive leadership, and I was on the other side of the table with our executive leadership. And we started talking about what do we do well and how can we complement each other. So when you look at the strategic partnership, it's not just a partnership of, yeah, let's agree to work together. This is why I think it makes sense. And again, Chris, jump in at any time. But when we looked at the vision of both Rubrik and NetApp, Chris, did you have something?
Nope.
Okay,
good.
Yeah, we wanted to deliver a modernized, simple, and effective hybrid multi-cloud platform for data protection. And what was neat is, and again, Chris and I got to see this play out from both sides of, from the vendors. Our CEOs are aligned directly. We have the same priorities. We have the same alignment from the C-level suite down. And most importantly, and this is where I've been fortunate enough to work with Chris, we're aligned at the product level and the alliance level, and also at from our reps on the street.
Yeah, I mean, Mike, you bring up a great point. You bring up a great point there, Mike, right? So, Mike brings up we're aligned at the CEO level. And I don't know about everybody else that's listening to this. I've seen so many of those relationships just die on the vine because the field isn't integrated in step with each other, right? So yes, our CEOs have a great relationship with each other. They're aligned with each other. But what makes this work is, like Mike said, like Mike and I met each other before there was a relationship, right? So what you'll see in the field is that the field teams work really, really well together, right? And that's kind of what that was happening before the relationship, even with the CEOs, right? So again, it's going to work because it's already working, and it was already working in the field, and the CEOs just kind of solidified what was going on in the field already, right? And kind of formalized it a little bit more, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah, great point. We just started gaining mutual customers, some of them at large scale, and they asked, it would be great if you guys could work together. We see a fit if you could talk to each other and figure out some of the integration points that would really be beneficial. And the first one is SnapDiff API that enables for large NAS data. It's an extreme performance increase. And this is where we've seen a lot of joint customers look at this and say, this is a really, really good strategic partnership from a technical perspective, not just hey, let's go to market together, but we've solved some really big problems with big data, which we can talk about. Being modern, we're one-click API driven, end-to-end global search, we're app aware, we're immutable, and we're cyber resilient in the event that there is a malicious actor or an unfortunate attack on your environment. And then on the NetApp StorageGRID and NAS data fabric side, makes perfect sense from the life cycle of the data. We're going to grab it, we're going to do it extremely efficient, very quickly, and then we're going to work together with NetApp to life cycle that data. And then the last piece is just being yes, sir.
Yep. No, I was just go ahead.
I was going to say that the last piece is multi-cloud native, whether it's private cloud or any of the hyperscalers out there. We've got strategic partnerships that align both from a Rubrik and NetApp perspective across all these different platforms. So it just made a ton of sense for us to move forward, from a strategic business perspective.
Okay, so Mike.
Yes, sir. Go for it, Chris.
Go ahead, Mike. Yeah,
Nope.
yeah, sure, great. So one of the things that NetApp believes, right? So if you're not familiar with the NetApp data fabric and why Rubrik and NetApp get along so well, right, is we believe in basically being where the customer's application and the data is, right? So that's where we're going to meet. So if you look at the NetApp data fabric, right, that it depicts on-prem, it depicts in the cloud, the public cloud. You can have a private cloud that's in a colo. So what we believe, right, NetApp we don't have and Rubrik doesn't have, we don't have a cloud, right? So you can't come out and sign up for a NetApp or Rubrik cloud, right? But what we do believe is that a customer is going to make the business decisions based upon their applications on where their applications should live, where they should be born, where they live, and where they die. And what goes along with the application, obviously, is the data. And what Rubrik and both NetApp believe is that we're going to meet where the data lies, right? So we're going to help you get to where you want to be with your applications and hence the data. And we're going to support you when and where you make those decisions, right? We're not going to force you to a location. You're going to move locations when it's right for you and your company, right? So managing the data fabric, right? So where we obviously it was a natural fit between the two companies was around NAS data, right? So Rubrik has done a great job integrating with our APIs to make the protection of large amounts of NAS data easier for customers, right? And more efficient, right? Mike, we also hit on databases and other VM workloads. You want to hit on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we started out essentially when we launched, we did VMs and we did that extremely well. Did that with speed and scale out capabilities. We had customers that were like, great. Okay, if you can solve database issues for us, and large NAS issues for us, that'd be even better. And that obviously was one of the things that spurred the partnership with NetApp. From a database perspective, I mean, we're talking. Think of it as DBR-based recoverability. For Oracle, SQL, SAP, whatever it is, it's getting below that 1 hour, 4 hour, 12-hour recoverability options or recovery time objectives. We're literally getting down to seconds, and that's one of the things from a database management perspective we think we do very well.
Awesome. And then one of the first things the two companies actually did together, right before we had any sort of integration or API integration, the two companies met as far as, and I'll be talking about it a little later on, is about our StorageGRID on-prem object store technology, right? We became a certified target for Rubrik's what they call an archive device, right? So you can actually archive, older records or records you want to keep, backups that you want to keep around for a longer period onto an archive device. And we became a certified target. We created white papers and tech reports from that. And that's where the relationship was born from. Another reason the two companies get along really well is Rubrik will tell you, right? I mean, NetApp, we're all about storage, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud. It's about data management of your data, wherever it lies. And so is Rubrik. Rubrik is about managing that data and the storage devices that go along with it, right? Even all the way up into the cloud, right? So Rubrik has the ability to manage workloads. We have something that's a service offering up within Azure. It's called Azure NetApp Files, where you can actually just log into Microsoft and sign up for basically, share storage, right? Up in Azure, right? The other offerings to the other hyperscalers, we have other offerings. They're called Cloud Volumes ONTAP. So you're running our storage operating system that's been virtualized by Google and by Amazon up in their offerings, right? So we have all of the major hyperscalers. You can actually purchase or sign up for our storage technology right from the hyperscalers themselves. So in Rubrik, it'll right there to either protect the data that lies up there or actually protect the data to any of those destinations as well.
No, great points, Chris.
All right.
The other big thing, and we lean heavily on, data services. NetApp's a data management company, as are we. But it's NetApp's data fabric. We're going to grab all the production VMs. We're going to grab the production databases, the production file sets, and we're going to do the protection. We're going to give you the ability to do data governance there and make that mobile. And that's where we're going to lean heavily on the NetApp solutions here on the back end, which Chris will talk about here in just a sec. And most importantly is assuring your data is safe and assuring it's what you expect. So I think those are the big things that really drive our partnership together.
Yeah, hey Mike, and the best part about it is the data doesn't have to be NetApp data, right? So if you look at what's depicted on the left, it's application data. So the storage that it resides on doesn't matter. Rubrik's able to protect it and basically send it to the destination of your choice.
No, that's a great point. Absolutely great point. I'm going to kick it over to you, Chris, for the next couple of integration points.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. Right. So Mike mentioned, and myself, we both mentioned a product named StorageGRID. So StorageGRID is our on-prem private object store offering. Okay. So what is StorageGRID? It's software-defined object storage. So what does that mean? That means you can actually consume it in multiple ways. You actually can consume it as pure software in a virtualized environment, right? You could run it as OVAs in a VMware environment. You could run it as in a bare metal environment. You also can actually run it as appliances, right? So we actually have appliances that you can actually purchase from us, hardware appliances that have compute and storage in them. And the best part about it is you could run all three of those types together, right? So there's different types of nodes in our grid. We have an admin node, we have storage nodes, we have a load balancer node. So it can be any combination of any of those three, right? Whether it's software defined, running as an appliance, or it can actually just be bare metal on the hardware itself. Again, one of the things that very similar with Rubrik, everything we do is policy based, right? And everybody's going to go, well, what's the big deal? This sounds like a buzzword. Well, it's very important when you're actually trying to manage mass amounts of data that you are able to have some sort of a policy that can be set globally across the cluster itself. And one of the big differentiators with StorageGRID compared to some other object stores out there, right? So not all object stores are created equal, is that the ability to use these lifecycle policies that we have built into the product to do a couple of different things, right? We can actually make sure the data is redundant. And when I say redundant, we could do full mirrors. We could use erasure coding to make sure there's redundancy. The other thing we could do is actually we could do things like geofencing, right? Where we can make sure the copies of your data, depending on where you are and where you live, right? If you go to Europe, and they have much stricter laws around, no data shall leave, my country, right? So we could do things like that, right? So not only providing for redundancy and resiliency, but we can make sure that it's in the context of, your localized the laws that in the country that you're living in. The other really good thing about StorageGRID, and this is a big differentiator with us, when I was an admin, right, a storage and systems admin, I didn't know the importance of the data, right? I did what I was told, right? I wasn't the application owner. How important was the data? Every application owner says their data is the most important. So nice thing about StorageGRID is you have these lifecycle policies, and that once the data is ingested, a lot of the other object stores out there is once it's ingested, that's pretty much, it becomes an effort to actually go and actually change how you put it in, how it was placed within the grid or within the object store itself. StorageGRID allows you to retroactively change the life cycles. And basically you can go in, day 90 and say, you know what, I know that's what we thought, what we wanted for, how many copies and where we wanted them to reside. I can retroactively go in and change all that, and it'll go through all the data that's within the grid and actually make those changes for you retroactively without any sort of a big project to worry about moving or copying or anything like that. The grid itself will actually handle that redistribution of workload. How do you get data into the grid? It uses the S3, as Mike said, the S3 API set, right? And also has the ability to use Swift in order to deposit data into the grid. Why use object store technology? So I would say 5 years ago, when I started talking about object store, nobody knew anything around object stores. Thank you, Amazon. Thank you, everybody else, because they have made object stores very popular and acceptable, right? So everybody's been using object store technology by sending them up to Amazon and Azure and to Google. And they've actually, basically, pushed object store technology out and allow it to leapfrog faster than anything else out there. So there's an acceptance behind object store technology because of the big hyperscalers. And to Mike's point, just like Rubrik CDM, it's cloud integrated. We can actually, basically mirror between nodes within the grid. We have the ability to mirror actually out into the public domain. So the one thing we see is that people usually around backup, and that's why we're here. We're here to talk about data protection today. It's usually the first application people bite off on writing data to an object store. But what we're seeing now is more and more people are actually using object store technology for other applications that reside within their environment. Oops, sorry about that little clicky there. So the good thing about StorageGRID, it's not a new technology. It's not a new technology to NetApp, right? So Bycast, which is the company that actually created this technology, is a 20-year-old company. NetApp actually acquired the company in 2010, so we've had it for 11 years, right? And what we try to do is we try to hit a 2 release a year cadence with the software. So we're constantly making changes to the software. It originally came out in the basically the medical field, the medical environment, the hospitals and the medical records type of industry, right? So you're not putting your data on something where the data is not going to be safe. It's going to be safe and secure, and it's going to have all those high-end features. Maybe not be using them day one, right? Because maybe you're just writing, backup data there, but it's going to be able to grow, with the changes that are going on in your environment and within your company. And that's exactly what we see, right? So most people are starting off as backup and archive. Don't ask me why, but those are always the applications that people are willing to take a chance, if you want to call it that, on object store or become familiar with using object store technology. But we are seeing it everywhere now because of the explosion of data, right? We're seeing it everything from obviously compliance and having to keep data around for longer periods of time. Video distribution, right? Being able to geographically across the world distribute videos, right? And like I mentioned, healthcare records, web content, media. Another big part is around IoT, right? All the sensor data that is being collected. So, more and more data is being, generated, and more data is having to be kept, right? So the big thing about, StorageGRID is that a lot of some people don't believe in the public cloud, right? For whatever reasons within their company. So we actually believe that StorageGRID gives you that type of an experience, but being able to provide it on-prem in a private type of cloud environment, right? And I also call it, what people ask, it's also an entryway into the public cloud, because there are technologies, right? Those lifecycle policies that I spoke about earlier, that gives you the ability to actually start making copies of your data from the on-prem version of StorageGRID up into the hyperscalers, right? So it's an entryway or an entry point into the public cloud, I like to call it. All right, so one of the things, right, and Mike had mentioned earlier around TCO with the two products becoming together, right? And we'll talk about this a little bit more later on. So Mike talked about a Rubrik cluster, right? So if you have a Rubrik cluster there's a feature called NAS Direct Archive. That's what the DA stands for. So Rubrik has the ability to kind of be used as a file indexing device and allows the data that's being protected, right? Those mass amounts of NAS data that you could be protecting, and allows it to bypass it actually landing on the bricks. It does index the files that are made up of the backup, but allows the data to actually be deposited right on a object store technology, right? And that could be StorageGRID. Today, that can actually be an NFS share that NetApp actually can provide, or it could be in the public cloud object store options as well. All right, so that's NAS Direct, and we'll talk about that a little later on as well. All right, so Mike, I'm going to hand it back over to you to discuss. Some people ask me, why did Rubrik decide, how they architected to protect their NAS using basically NAS protocols, and some of the decisions that you guys had to make when you were looking at the problem that existed with these mass amounts of data to be protected.
Nope, thanks, Chris. I got a smile on my face about this one. So when we started backing up NAS, it was about in 2016-ish or so. And we looked at the protocols that were out there. They were great, but just like a lot of the legacy backup products, they've been around for 20 years. And files got bigger, networks got faster. Some of the protocols like NDMP, they haven't. So when we looked at this and how we were going to back this up, we looked at the problems. Data's tenfold bigger than it was even 5 years ago. But we had large data sets. Everything's at scale. Terabytes all of a sudden, 10, 15 years ago, I was in the block storage business. 30 terabytes on-prem was huge. Now we've got customers, even if they're just mid-sized, are hundreds of terabytes, if not petabytes. And what we're seeing is people were just throwing a bunch of different NAS solutions at it, different vendors, different models, and again the proprietary backup approach. It was very, very legacy driven. So what we did, and this is specifically for NetApp, where we've really been able to go in and really just speed things up and provide additional value and really unlocking the power of your data. As that data's coming in, Chris mentioned, we're indexing everything. So you've got global file search and recovery across all protected NetApp NAS devices. We've got, we're communicating with the ONTAP API integration. So automatic share discovery. So if new shares get created, we can automatically protect those. So we've got snapshots for point in time consistency, SnapDiff integration. We're going to definitely talk more about this. It's faster incrementals, significantly lowering your recovery point objective. I mean, I've heard stories of customers that it takes 24 hours just to get one NAS share backed up. So we can help. SnapMirror replica support, this is huge. Instead of putting, Rubrik at site A and site B, where you've got NetApp at site A and site B, we can be at that secondary site if you're replicating, and we can actually back up that SnapMirror replica from that secondary array. So again, just doing it simpler. Security and compliance, cannot mention this enough. We can detect high-level rates of change, high-level rates of encryption. I won't get too far into this because I've got a slide on it. But we can tell you if your data's is potentially being hijacked. We can tell you if you've got sensitive data that's exposed. Data lifecycle management between Rubrik and NetApp, whether it's NAS Direct Archive, whether it's FabricPools, it's a very, very good story for lifecycling that data. And then we've got incremental forever. We looked at NDMP, it's essentially, fulls forever. And again, on the FabricPool side, it's a very good complementary story. So the NAS Direct Archive piece, again, it's a really cool thing. But, again, if you had a petabyte of data, we used to have to land that, index it, and then archive it. But, with SnapDiff integration and with this technology that we developed, you'll see some things coming up here that really talk about how we can, lower recovery time objectives, this really lower your footprint of gear that's sitting on the floor to do the same thing, to be honest. So I'm going to kick it back over to Chris here for a little bit, because FabricPools, it's the lifecycle management piece. I really like this. This is one of the coolest things that I see that NetApp has today.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. All right, let me take the steering wheel here. So Mike had mentioned FabricPool. So for those of you that are not familiar with FabricPool, right? So if you look at your storage device today, you're writing data to it, right? Let's say, especially in today's day and age, you're probably going to be writing to some sort of flash device. and you're writing your data, and what you're going to wind up seeing, I'm going to build that up over, for the course of the slide here, is that probably anywhere from 75 to 80% of your data is actually probably stale, right? So wouldn't it be cool, right, or useful, or efficient, that I can actually take that inactive data and send it out to some sort of an object technology, right? Whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, right? We call it the cloud tier. So we're able to take our file system, right, our primary file system, and we're able to say, okay, any blocks, depending on the policies that you set, whether it's backups that you take within to protect the recovery points that you take to protect our file system, whether it's active file data, and we're able to set up these policies that say, okay, based upon those policies, I'm going to actually start archiving these blocks out to object store technology. So what we're doing is we're actually extending our file system, right? So that the file system itself is made up of flash, which is only going to be made up of active data. And it's actually going to be extended out to object store technology, which is going to give you a total lower cost of ownership, right? So that's what FabricPool is. The best part about FabricPool is it does not change the end user's interaction with our storage subsystem. So in other words, when they're accessing a share or they're accessing a LUN, and the blocks that make up either one of those have been archived, they're still going to access them the same way they would have before. And either one or two things are going to happen. The data is going to be sitting in the performance tier, and you're going to get the speed of SSD in order to get that data back. Or if for some reason that the data has been archived out, it will automatically be pulled back into the performance tier and actually provided that way back to the end user, right? So there's no interaction or no change in the end user's interaction with the data. Now, the problem with that is that when you talk about some of the other backup products, well, backup actually is touching your data, right? So Mike had mentioned before, the nice part about Rubrik is, one, it's incremental forever, right? So as the data is hitting that performance tier and it's being protected, it's now been protected by Rubrik, and the data will actually now, as it ages, be sent out or extended out to the cloud tier. Rubrik will now team that up with our efficient, Mike had mentioned the word SnapDiff, but it's our rapid differencing engine, and says, okay, every time I go to run a backup, show me what's changed file-wise. Well, the only thing file-wise that have changed is anything that's sitting in the performance tier. So on a nightly basis, daily basis, whatever basis that you're running the SLAs from Rubrik, the only thing that it will ever be touching is really the data that's sitting in the performance tier. So there's never a need to pull back any of the data coming from the cloud tier. Now, you might say, well, Chris, what's the big deal? Well, probably not a big deal when you're talking about an on-prem object store like StorageGRID. But if we're talking about a hyperscaler object store, well, there's egress charges, right, to pull that data back. Right, and that's fine, right? If an end user needs the data, right, they need the data, right? That's the whole point of a data fabric, right? Is to get your data back where you need it and when you need it. Well, but I don't want it pulled back just because my backup product needs to protect it. And one of the things that with Rubrik and interaction with the incremental forever and our API set, it will never ask for that data to be pulled back from an off-prem object store. All right. All right, Mike, let's talk about some of those APIs we talked about earlier, right? And some of the integrations.
Yeah, this one I really like. And again, this really was our kind of goes to our strategy where we look to not do things traditionally. So we look at the backup and how we back up from ONTAP. So there's an API call. And what's nice about that is, first of all, it's quick. Second of all, it's API to API. And the nice part about it is it's going to instantly create that ingest. And again, how we're architected from a hardware node perspective or a hardware perspective, it's all parallel flash ingest. It's scale out backup is the easiest way to put it. Now, the nice part about this is, and this is where the partnership, I'd say, really got serious, is NetApp we were fortunate to get the ability to back up from NetApp's SnapDiff API. So it's going to quickly identify the files and directory differences between the two snapshot copies. We're still walking the tree. We have to do that once. But after we do that, we're not going to have to keep scanning the tree itself. So it's only going to really essentially the best way I heard this was, instead of looking for a needle in a haystack the size of a football team, NetApp's going to hand us that needle in a haystack, so we don't have to sift through the whole thing and hope we find it. So we've got some examples of how we're able to knock this down from a time perspective. And how does that work from the NetApp side? And that's where I'm going to kick it back to Chris. But it's really going to cut down the amount of time that we're taking to do backups.
Yeah, so if you look at, one of the bases of NetApp technology is this differencing engine, right? So we use the differencing engine for a lot of different things. We use it for our data movement, right? So when we do our replication, we understand what's changed from the last time that we, sent data to a destination. So this is an extension of that. What we've basically done, if you want to see it depicted, right, is that we take a snapshot, right? And the snapshot depicts what the file system looked like at that time, right? So if you notice, we got, five directories, right? 0 through 4. And if we expand out directory 2, we'll see that there's, 3 files in directory 2. So that's the way the snapshot, right? Snapshot's a point in time copy, right? But so then what happens is, when we take a new snapshot, or actually Rubrik actually uses the API to call for a new snapshot to be taken, it will actually rapidly notice that file 4 has changed between the two snapshots. So now what happens is, like Mike said, instead of having to walk the directory structure to figure out what's changed, we basically say, hey, Rubrik, file 4.dat has changed. And Rubrik says, okay, we're going to go protect file 004.dat. And that's actually what it actually starts protecting, right? So again, you'll see it's optimized, especially, the more data you have, actually the better and more efficient it becomes. If you look at, graphically or flowchart wise, what actually happens, right? So, we take a snapshot, or Rubrik will actually ask for a snapshot, right? If a previous one does not exist, right? So the first time through, like Mike said, that first full, yeah, they'll have to walk it, right? But they're walking the directory structure just to get the names of the file, not status them so much, and just protect everything that's there in that first full. But if a snapshot had existed previously, when they take the new snapshot, they actually say, now I know what's changed, and they're only going to protect the meta, basically they can only protect the files that are changed, the ACLs that go along with it. And after they're done, they will basically unmount and delete the older of the two NetApp snapshots. All right. One of the things that, one of the improvements that, the companies aren't standing still, right? So yes, there were, things that we've done, the joke I like to make is crawl, walk, and run, right? We did things to start off, but, it's been improving, right? So that with the most current version 5.3.1 of Rubrik CDM, Rubrik added the ability to, obviously they were able to protect, off of the primary copy of the data. They're actually able to use our replication technology and actually point to our destination systems, right, where people are using for DR purposes, and actually protect from that DR copy using the same advantages that they did off of the primary system. So that rapid change engine using that API set in order to do the differencing of files in order to be protected. And again, they can actually send that to they could hold it on the brick. They could actually extend it out to a public hyperscaler, or keep it on-prem, whether it's an object store like StorageGRID or an NFS export today, right? Mike, do you want to go through some of the goodness that you guys have seen using your product with our API set?
Oh yeah, absolutely. These are kind of some of my favorite slides, and it's because you get to go fast. So here's a backup scenario. So we started benchmarking kind of pre and post SnapDiff and API integration. So say you got 5 million files, and your daily change rate is 1.5%. So roughly 7.5 million files are going to be added, deleted, and updated per day. So we went through and we actually did some benchmarking. And again, this is the fun slide. I love the fact that we not only get to benchmark this, but we get to go basically prove that it works. So we're seeing 10x improvement in performance with SnapDiff API. Not only is it important because that's faster, it reduces the load on your production systems, and it shrinks your backup windows by a factor of 10, if not more. So we benchmarked this. This is a real number. We did this in our lab with Rubrik and NetApp gear. It took 7 to 14 hours to scan all 500 million files just to find those 7.5 million updates. And this was pre-SnapDiff integration. Post-SnapDiff integration, 7 minutes. So that's the needle in the haystack right there. I never heard a better analogy for it. So it is unbelievably faster. You don't want your primary arrays, getting hit with NDMP jobs or backup jobs that are running. It seems like almost, perpetually, and they're just really never finishing. Those have been a lot of the problems that we've been able to come in with NetApp, with smaller customers all the way up to extremely large ones and solve those problems. So that's definitely one of the coolest slides I get to see, because it was fun to benchmark that when it got done in 7 minutes. It was kind of incredible, actually.
Cool.
So there's the last number, 92% quicker.
All right. So, we spoke about something called NAS Direct Archive, right? So, somebody had mentioned in the questions before about the TCO. So basically what it comes down to is a couple of things, right? One is you're not going to have a cluster, Rubrik cluster sprawl just in order to back up, mass amounts of NAS data, right? So you're able to take a Rubrik cluster, index all your data, right? So file index it so you actually can do, searches for recovery. And again, teaming it up with our, rapid change engine of SnapDiff, you're able to actually take that data, index it through the cluster, and then archive it directly onto the object store or NFS archive, right? So now when we look at, why is it, the total cost of ownership lower? So if you look at object store technology, or, it is actually made up of, we actually have fast, dense disks that are making up our object store, right? So the total cost of ownership is actually a lot lower than it would be if it was a flash-based system, right? And same thing with, the public object store technology. They're not using, for the most part, they're not using flash technology to actually store your data, right? They're using some sort of, again, that depends on which hyperscaler you're talking about, but, that's where they're getting the, their value, or their, to make the provided offering a lot more cost effective, if that makes sense. All right. All right. Hey, Mike, we got a little bit of information. I know we're starting to run out of time here, right? So do you want to talk about some of the things that we've been doing together as partners?
Yep, sure will. So NetApp is essentially now a reseller for Rubrik. So if you're a NetApp customer today and you enjoy your account teams and you want to learn more about Rubrik, this was a momentous achievement for Rubrik, just because we're fairly new. NetApp's been the industry leader for decades. You can purchase Rubrik through your NetApp account team. We're getting them up to speed and trained where they can come in, they can bring us in, we can tell you the story. And again, you're still just procuring this unified solution from one vendor. So that's huge for us.
Awesome. And then, this is actually some of these are actually in the handout section already. David actually put them up there, a subset of these up on the handouts portion of the platform. But these are some, all of these are hyperlinks that will actually bring you to some what we call Tech on Top podcasts. We got, data on using StorageGRID for data tiering, right? So you could read, I'm not going to go through and read all these, right? How do you protect your data sitting up in Azure, right? With Rubrik. And, the last one that, Mike's been hitting on, and I actually have told him from the outside looking in, security nowadays, right? It's like, don't underestimate just because you guys have always had it and you've have this very secure platform. Don't stop talking about it, right? Because now it's more important than ever, right? So I think that's it. I don't know how much time we have for Q&A, but David, I'm going to hand it back to you at this point.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great presentation, Chris and Mike. We do have some questions for you. While we do that, I'm going to bring up this poll for everyone out there in the audience. It says, what additional information would you like about the Rubrik and NetApp joint solution? We appreciate your feedback on that. Notice that it is a multi-select poll question, so feel free to select more than one response there. And so now let's start going through some of the many questions that have come in from the audience. First one, the question here is they're asking, how is the masterless architecture implemented Chris or Mike, who wants to take that?
That'd be Mike.
Yeah, it's a scale-out architecture. So it's a deliverable via 4-node 2U appliance. As new appliances are added in or new nodes are added in, it's added out. The erasure coding is extended across the existing and the new components of the cluster. And again, I hate to say unlimited, but we've got some exceptionally large customers in the multi-petabyte range, where they've started small, maybe 3-4 years ago. It's auto discovery as new nodes or new bricks are added into the cluster. There's a back-end database that keeps track of all that, and that's a distributed database. The metadata is distributed, and everything's protected via erasure coding. So, great question.
Yeah, very nice. And then next question, I'm guessing this is also about Rubrik. Well, it is about Rubrik. They're asking, can we use Rubrik with other cloud management solutions? I know you talked about the API and interoperability.
Yeah, and we do, from a generic perspective, we don't have obviously nearly as good of a partnership with a lot of these other folks. They've got some other competing solutions. We felt NetApp was the best one if you're looking for that true integrated ones. But yeah, we have a ton of pure customers, a lot of customers that have HPE solutions on the primary side. So good question.
Excellent. And then what about support? If folks went ahead with the Rubrik NetApp solution and there's an issue or a question, how does the support alliance work?
Sure. Yeah, and I'll
Mike,
talk to this. So, Chris, is that you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go for it.
Yep.
No, you go for it. It's all you.
Yep, no worries. So yeah, I mean, Rubrik will handle support. Obviously, if there's something going wrong with your backups, or some sort of restore issue, Rubrik will be the front on that. They actually have backline abilities to actually, as far as if it's some sort of a hardware issue, as far as an archive goes or anything like that with us. But Rubrik will still run point on support for most of that.
Yeah, and we do have a lot of engineering efforts in the back end. So if there's an issue between, maybe it's an API call, it's not working, our staff does communicate on the back end with NetApp staff. So there's some back channel communications that go on there too, depending on the severity of the problem.
Got it. Okay. And then let's see, here's another question that they're asking about SnapDiff. Is SnapDiff similar or the same as change block tracking?
It's not change block tracking because we're not tracking it as it occurs, right? So there's no portion on disk that you're saying, well, as blocks are changing, let's keep track of it. It is literally done on the fly via our snapshot technology, which is built into this, basically our file system, right? So again, like I talked about and I showed on those slides, when you're taking a snapshot, it basically requires two of them. And it actually just compares the two. Again, it's the same technology we use to move our data or to replicate our data. The only difference is the outcome of it is a list of files that have been changed between those two snapshots. So a little bit different than change block tracking, which is occurring as the data is actually being changed.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, thank you for clarifying that. Let's see here. There's another question. Does the backup data always have to reside within the Rubrik cluster?
No, it does not. And that's one of the reasons I think from a partnership perspective, we've done very well with NetApp, is you have the ability to offload that. Typically, we see customers do it after about 30 days. So, and then push it down to like a StorageGRID or, maybe do an NFS share or to one of the hyperscalers. So, no, it does not need to live on us perpetually.
Okay, excellent. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have here in our live Q&A session. There's a lot of great questions. We'll have to try to get back to those electronically. We appreciate all the great questions. I want to remind everyone, don't forget to respond there to the poll question. Mike and Chris, really excellent presentation today. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And also, I want to remind the audience out there, before you go, check out the handouts tab. There's a lot of great resources in there, including the Better NAS Backup RPO document, the Tech ONTAP podcast, and the Data Storage and Data Protection ebook is also there available for download. So grab those before you end the webinar or leave the webinar today. And then last thing I want to make sure I do is announce the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card. This is going out to Paul Dorsey from Ohio. Congratulations, Paul Dorsey from Ohio. We'll also reach out to our Best Question Prize winner as well. Don't forget to respond to the poll there, because we are wrapping up now. Visit netapp.com and rubrik.com for more information on how to reimagine your data protection and disaster recovery for the future. I hope that you learned a lot, and have a great day. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.